about the factors that affect diffusion. And to that, we're also going to talk about simple versus facilitated diffusion. But this is just diffusion part 2. We have part 1 where we talked about diffusion. What does it mean? What are the different forms of diffusion? So this is just summarize and winding up with diffusion. And this is having simple versus facilitated diffusion, and we also have factors that affect the net rate of diffusion. Okay, david7sansitheater@gmail.com. You can contact for consultation. Okay, and David7 Sansi Theater, our good channel. Don't forget to subscribe to it. You click the bell for more videos we upload every day. You like, comment, and share for other students to also enjoy. So if I just start with this, which is simple, comparing simple and contrasting simple and facilitated diffusion, it means we shall have one, specificity. In facilitated diffusion, we are using carrier proteins, which are highly specific for different molecules, which is different from what happens in simple diffusion, where we only have channels, which channels are not specific to any molecule. They just transmit what is transmissible, okay, according to size. And two, we have saturation. If you increase the concentration of the substance, there will be an increase in simple diffusion, but this increase will not be limited by any other factor, okay? It will continue increasing. Simple diffusion continues to increase and is not limited because it does not depend on things like carrier proteins, which can be saturated. On the other hand, facilitated diffusion, the rate of diffusion increases with increase in concentration, with increase in concentration gradient to reach a limit beyond which a further increase in diffusion cannot occur. So as we increase the concentration gradient, you will find that facilitated diffusion will increase. The rate of facilitated diffusion will increase to reach a limit beyond which a further increase in diffusion cannot occur. We shall see that more in this very video. And at this point, we call it a saturation point. And here all the binding sites of the carrier proteins are occupied, and the system operates at its maximum capacity. It cannot transmit more substances beyond that capacity, okay? The third difference is about competition. For example, if you have two molecules, say molecule A and molecule B, being carried by the same proteins, it means there will be a competition between the two molecules for transport. This is in regard to facilitated diffusion, which will depend on carrier proteins. Thus, an increase in concentration of A molecule will decrease the transport of molecule B and vice versa. So this is a third difference. That if you have two molecules competing for the same carrier protein, it means if you increase one of the molecules, the other molecule to be transported, it will be decreased, and vice versa. Okay, so this competition does not exist in simple diffusion. It does not exist, okay? So now we tune to the factors that affect the net rate of diffusion. These factors are many, and one I will begin with the cell membrane permeability. And this is the major determining factor for the net diffusion. Excuse me. It's a major determining factor for the net diffusion, which in turn depends upon many other factors. Cell membrane permeability depends on several factors. For example, you can talk about the diffusion, the thickness of the membrane, okay? Diffusion or permeability is inversely proportional to the thickness of the cell membrane. If the membrane is thicker, the rate of diffusion reduces, all right? Two, it will depend on the lipid solubility of the substance. If the molecule, for example, let me bring it out like this, diffusion is directly proportional to the lipid solubility. The higher the lipid solubility, then it means the higher the rate of diffusion. Okay, the third point is about the distribution of protein channels in the cell. Distribution of protein channels in the cell membrane. The rate of diffusion of lipids in soluble substances is directly proportional to the number of channels per unit area of the cell membrane. So if the molecule cannot dissolve in lipids, is not soluble in lipids, its diffusion will depend on protein channels, which means if the number is low, even the rate of diffusion will be low, okay, per unit area of the cell membrane. Let's continue. Let's talk about the effect of concentration on diffusion. Just as you can see this is what I was talking about. That if you increase the concentration gradient, okay, or for example, let me just talk about extracellular concentration of the substance. This is the same as increasing the concentration gradient of the substance. As we make it wider or larger, it means the simple diffusion, which is A, will increase. A is simple diffusion. And this simple diffusion will increase and it can't be limited by any other factor. But facilitated diffusion, which is in red, will increase and then be limited by the number or by the activity of carrier proteins. Okay, they are slow. I mean, all the binding sites of molecules are being occupied. They are not slow, by that is their maximum activity. They cannot transmit beyond that. This is the saturation point at around 50%, as you can see. So simple diffusion green, facilitated diffusion, that is red. Once you increase concentration gradient, that is what happens. Okay, so to continue, permeability depends on these factors also. Permeability we talked about, it will depend on the thickness of the membrane. It will depend on the distribution of protein channels per unit area. So another factor is that it will depend, permeability of the membrane also depend on the temperature. So rate of diffusion or permeability will increase with increase in temperature. And this is due to increased motion of molecules and ions of the solution. Yeah, temperature rises, motion increases, and diffusion will increase also. Another factor that affects permeability of the membrane is the rate of simple diffusion. I mean, it's the size of the molecules, sorry. So the size of the molecules, yeah. If the size is larger, diffusion will be lower, which means rate of simple diffusion is inversely proportional to the size of the molecules. Another factor is about total area of the membrane. If the total area is larger, total area of the membrane is larger, the rate of diffusion will also be larger or it will be increased. This is here where I say that the net diffusion of the substance is direct proportional to the total area of the membrane. Alright, so what is the effect of concentration gradient? So the first factor was about cell membrane permeability. That one affects rate of net diffusion, cell membrane permeability. These other six factors we've been describing, they are determinants of cell membrane permeability. So now we are switching to another factor which affects the net rate of diffusion, and that is concentration gradient. The simple diffusion is direct proportional to the concentration gradient, but facilitated diffusion, however, has certain limitations beyond which or beyond certain level of concentration gradient. That above this level of concentration gradient, other factors will limit it so that, as we've seen, that maximum occupation of the site saturation points, okay, saturation of the protein channels. So these other factors beyond that concentration gradient will limit rate of facilitated diffusion. So that is it. Concentration gradient. Yeah, if that is for simple diffusion, it is directly proportional. Okay, so let's continue. What is the effect of electrical potential gradient? Okay, electrical potential gradient also affects the net rate of diffusion. As you can see here, if you see this diagram, we have negative charges and we also have positive charges. Okay, so how does it affect net rate of diffusion? Look at this. The concentration of negative ions are the same on both sides of the membrane, but there is an electrical gradient across the cell membrane because of positive charge outside and the negative charge inside the membrane. Positive charge outside and a negative charge inside the membrane. You see, if I'm talking about the concentration of negative ions, the concentration of negative ions is the same, but the mere presence of positive charges or positive charges outside the membrane creates an electrical potential gradient. Okay, so the positive charge will attract the negative ions, whereas the negative charge will repel them. As you can see here, you had the same number at first, but the negative charge is repelling these negative charges from inside the cell to go out, and the positive charge is also attracting them. Okay, so therefore the net diffusion occurs from inside to outside till the concentration gradient created balances electrical gradient. Okay, so I hope you get my point here. If I can remove this, okay, that initially we had same number of negative charges inside the cell. This is the inside, which is negatively charged, and this is the outside extracellular fluid, which is positively charged. This is maintained by the sodium potassium pump. Okay, so it phase pump. Okay, so we had initially same number of negative charges inside and outside, but presence of a negative charge inside repels the negative charges from inside to go outside. And this repulsion also adds on the attraction of the negative charges by the positive charge outside the cell membrane. So this diffusion from inside to outside will increase until when concentration gradient now becomes the limiting factor, or when concentration gradient balances electrical gradient created. Let's continue. The last fourth factor which affects the net rate of diffusion is the pressure gradient. If you see, you have a piston here. This is the outside of the membrane. There's pressure 1, and inside we have pressure 2. Okay, so this is the inside of the membrane or inside the cell. So high pressure, if you see this, I can describe here. It has been observed that the increased amounts of energy are available to cause net movements of molecule from the high pressure side towards the low pressure side. P1, you see we have a lot of pressure. These two arrows here, and P2 we have just less pressure. So if you apply more pressure, we have a piston here. If you apply more pressure on the outside of the membrane, more molecules move towards the inside of the cell or across the membrane due to pressure gradient created. That they will move from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. And the high pressure developed by the piston on one side of the membrane causes greater number of molecules to strike this membrane. As well, applying this pressure, more molecules are striking this membrane, which results in the net diffusion to this side of the membrane, the inside. Okay, let's continue. So I just urge you not to forget to subscribe to our videos. Okay, you like them, you share, comment, share to other students who also enjoy our videos. David 7 Science Theater, we love you.